Don't get up, Brady. I'm coming right to get you. Say what?
Good morning, everyone. I was going to start with a song, but it says something about Facebook not being logged in. So those of you who are on Facebook, it's not logged in. We're logged into YouTube. We'll post it later onto Facebook. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to Center for Spiritual Living Morristown. I'm Frankie. I'm the spiritual director here, and we are Center for Spiritual Living Morristown. That's how you can find us on the web and on Facebook and on YouTube and on, I think, Twitter and on Meetup. I think that's it. Instagram. So those of you that are here for the first time or are here for the first time on live stream, we're so glad you're here. If you're here in person, you get to walk over to our bookshelf and you get a free book. Just grab one. So we are exploring a theme this whole year. It's called Living Out Loud. And for the month of March, we are cultivating authenticity, which nobody wants, right? We prefer to be inauthentic. Right? It's kind of like, oh, okay. So, and that's because there's always a deeper way to explore it. So today I'll be talking about this idea of there's really only one thing that's happening. There's only one thing that we're really doing at a spiritual level. Some might call it two, but I call it one because it's the same of the two parts. And then how do we build bridges between those two? As most of us know, we get to live in the world of spirituality, our essence, but also in the world of human form. So there's a bridge there that we get. Because in truth, they're not separate. They are one. And then we get to ask some questions by noticing how we are not in the flow or not in our authentic self. So today we have Gail Belluardo assisting. She's going to do a powerful power talk. And Gail is available today after celebration to do what we call a treatment express, which is like a quickie treatment. Because if you want more than a quickie treatment, you have to call our licensed practitioners and make an appointment with them so that we can support you. But Gail will just do, what do you want me to treat for? Our word for affirmative prayer, and then she treats with you. It's really fun, right? So let's say hello to one another. The way we do that in our community is through the Namaste practice, which is the Sanskrit word, one of the oldest languages on the planet, for the divinity in me blesses the divinity in you. So be aware of the giving and the receiving that's happening. So put your hands together and just say to somebody, Namaste. Namaste. And let's treat, which is our word for affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. The reason we call it that because it's something that we declare within our own mind, our own heart, our own consciousness as the truth. So let's know together that there is only one life, one love, one truth, one presence, one life force. It is that which governs our breath, our heartbeat, and every aspect of our lives. And just like we don't really need to think about the breath and the heartbeat until it falters, we don't really have to think about our spiritual life because it already is fully formed. So today we tune into that in a new way by exploring our own mindset, our own consciousness, and noticing that many of our beliefs are in harmony with the very truth of our being, and some of them are out of whack a little bit. We can tell this when we don't feel good, when we are struggling, when we're challenged. What if those moments are gifts and blessings for us to rise up in the very truth of our being and notice that something deeper, greater, more powerful wants to be lived? Then to know that the entire universe supports us in that endeavor and blesses us in every aspect of it. So today we declare that we are brave in our experience, in our expression, in our exploration, and in our remembrance of the truth of our very being. And so it is. So it is.
If I just show up, be open to surprise, there could be miracles right before my eyes. If I just let go, something better might appear. Who knows what will happen when joy replaces fear? When I dare to be all that I'm meant to be, like a shooting star across the sky, unstoppable and free. I shine my light, I turn darkness into light. When I dare to be brave, dare to be brave, I'll trust in who I am, be bold and take a shot. Who knows what will happen when I give it all I got? Even when I'm scared, I'll step into the rain. So much to offer with the gifts that I can bring. When I dare to be all that I'm meant to be, like a shooting star across the sky, unstoppable and free. I shine my light, I turn darkness into light. When I dare to be brave, oh, I'm brave. Worried for so long and I've wasted too much time. Now I'm ready to take a chance and claim what is mine. The path is free and clear, there's nothing in my way. I listen to my heart and not what other people say. I'm gonna take that leap. I never felt so strong. I might not do it perfectly, but I'm right where I belong. And when I dare to be all that I'm meant to be, like a shooting star across the sky, I'm unstoppable and free.
That's a song by Karen Drucker called Brave. You're brave. Even though you might say, oh, no, I'm not, because. No, that's the truth. It's brave, not because. Brave, period, right? So my topic today is building bridges. One of the things that we use in our language a lot, which can be, the language of it is loaded, but it can be quite confusing. But we say that we are divinity made visible. In our teaching, and maybe there's some different ways that you've heard it say. We say we are spirit informed. We're human beings having a spiritual experience. What are some other things that you've heard?
An individualized expression.
You're an individualized expression of the universal, the oneness, of the one. Yeah, what else? A drop in the ocean. I love that. Yes. So what we then get to experience on the spiritual path is, let me see how I'm experiencing that, because each of us experience that in a completely different way. That's how we become authentic. Because each of us is experiencing our divinity in a unique way. Your way won't work for me, and my way won't work for you. And so we get to realize that that's the good news. That's the good news. The good news is that you and I, our spirit, the universe, divine love, in this physical human experience. And so there's only one thing happening. Some people might say it's two things. But I say this a lot. You hear me say it all the time. I say it in treatments, I say it to myself, I say it in my classes, I say it on Sundays. There's only one thing happening, and that is remembering or forgetting. You might say that's two things. No, to me it's one thing. Because I'm either remembering that I'm a divine being, that I'm a spiritual being, or I'm forgetting. To me, that's just one thing. And so in the world of duality, where there is two things, we might have them interpreted as two completely different things. But if you really think about it, as we go through life, we're either remembering that we're a spiritual being, that we're connected to this one universal source that is all giving, all loving, all providing, or we forget. And what if that's a gift? I believe at this point in my life, that's the really great thing about aging. We figure some things out that I didn't figure out in my 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that I really get to experience now, and I love that, is that I get to notice. I get to notice that when I'm in the remembrance, I feel more authentic. Would you agree? So, how do you experience being authentic in that space of remembrance? How do you show up? What's different? Anybody?
You're real.
You're real.
Peaceful.
You're more peaceful.
And you're experiencing what gives you joy.
When you're experiencing joy,
You feel strong.
you feel stronger. You have more hope. You have more faith. You feel like you're in the flow. I had one of those weeks last week where everything was just in the flow. I had a bank issue for months that was resolved like that. I had to go pick up some pictures at the drugstore, and they were ready, and the lady was so lovely, and I had a huge discount on frames. Just everything. My taxes just got done. All of that just kind of flowed, and I was really noticing it. So when we notice that we're in the flow, when things flow, when we feel good, when we feel strong, we're being more authentic. More authentic in the sense of being connected to our source, to our essential nature, and aware of it. So when we are forgetting who and what we are, we tend to become inauthentic. And nobody goes around saying, I think I'm just going to go be really inauthentic at work today or in my relationship. It's usually not a conscious thing. But when you're not being authentic, how do you feel? Heavy. Disconnected. Nervous. Frustrated. Stuck. Anxious. Worried. Insecure. Notice the difference? So this tells us that we already know when we're living in that place of remembrance of the oneness of all life, the remembrance that we are one with spirit, that we're spirit in form, and when we are in a place of forgetfulness. Those moments are important to notice, because when you notice them, there's something you can do about it. When you're aware, you can have a little more compassion. When you're aware, you can make different choices, or maybe slip into a spiritual practice or two. And so, in truth, we're always in this place of the one life, because we cannot be outside of it. But our own mindset, our own belief system, conscious and unconscious, will reveal itself by means of our experience. So in a way, we're always building bridges. We're building bridges between our divine nature and our human nature, because they cannot be separate. We're building bridges between feeling authentic and feeling inauthentic, between remembering and forgetting. There's always that bridge building, and that is something to be celebrated. Because as human beings, we tend to stress about it, or fear about it, or worry about it, or be insecure about it, or compare with somebody else about it, or feel the need to pretend. I have found that in this kind of teaching, not so much anymore, but when I first came into it, you had to pretend to be happy, because if you weren't, you got this message like, what's wrong with your consciousness, right? So in this moment, in this place, in this center, with my own opinion, there's no need to pretend. When we pretend, we get depressed. I do. If I'm pretending that I'm happy when I'm not, it just makes me drag my behind. So we want to pay attention and really notice, and then realize that when we feel authentic, to not shame ourselves for it. I'm going to talk about that next week, this whole idea of shame. Because shame is about believing that there's something inherently wrong with us. And that's part of the human experience as well. Just think Adam and Eve. Ooh, you know? As soon as they realized they were naked, they had to hide. That's a metaphor. That may not be the truth, but that's a beautiful metaphor of what happens when we feel the need to pretend or the need to hide. But today the invitation is to notice and to keep building bridges. To keep saying, what if all of it is a gift? What is it if it's about my healing? Now remember, healing in the science of mind teaching is not fixing or curing. Healing is the truth revealing itself by means of us. Revealing our true nature. Being authentic in relationship to our spiritual nature, which is perfect, whole, and complete, as it is. You know, it's hard to grasp sometimes, especially when we look at the world, at the news, at others, at people we struggle with. But that's the truth, and that's what we get to remember. And so what we learn then is this idea that there's no need to struggle. There's no need to struggle. I've been saying that to myself a lot. When I make up this idea that I need to be anxious about something, or struggle with something, or worry about something, I'm going, wait, just let go. There's no need to struggle, because it's the spirit within me to do the work, and to trust that. So we're always building bridges, even between our mind and our body, right? I mean, anybody here ever judge their body for anything, criticize it? No. That's a bridge that wants to be built by you. A bridge of loving the body temple exactly the way it is, because it houses your spirit. Anybody ever struggle with relationships? Not here, nobody here. When we struggle with relationships, It's because a bridge wants to be built by you with the consciousness that is already inherent, a consciousness of wisdom, compassion, and love. Maybe some of you struggle with career stuff. What am I going to do? What am I doing? I love what I'm doing. I don't love what I'm doing. Recently, somebody told me that they've hated their career all their lives. And I was like, really? That's so sad. That just broke my heart. So sometimes we have to build a bridge between who we are and what we do in the world with our gifts and talents. So there's 3 things that we can do to build these bridges. And the good news is, again, more good news, is that you're already doing those. You've already done them a gazillion times. You'll be doing them for the rest of your life. The first one is just to notice. Notice how you feel when you're not in sync with your divine nature. Notice how you feel when you're struggling with relationships, with your body, with money, with career. Just notice how you feel. Be present in it. Think it through. Allow it instead of fight it. This cultivates awareness. Once you have awareness, you have the freedom to choose. But if we don't have awareness, we can't choose. We stay stuck. The second thing is acknowledge it. Acknowledge what you're thinking, acknowledge what you're feeling, acknowledge the disconnect, acknowledge that a bridge wants to be built by you, because sometimes we hope somebody else will build that bridge, and once they do, all is well, right? But the bridge has to be built by us in consciousness first. And so acknowledgement is really about acceptance. That's a tough one, right? Especially when we're struggling to accept what is. But it's out of acceptance that we find a greater sense of freedom, a greater sense of authenticity. And the third one is embrace. Embrace is about having compassion for ourselves and each other. Embracing means to have not just acceptance, but to have love for what is. And I know that can be difficult. If you're struggling with something, to love that, really? Yes, to love it. Because when we love it, it can transform. When we hate it, it's going to stick until we let it go. And it's through love and acceptance and compassion that we can let it go. So I recently read a quote that I've been carrying around. I love it so much. It just makes my heart sing. And so I want to share it with you today because it so relates to what we're talking about, what we're exploring. It's by the 17th century Jewish mystic, Baal Shem Tov, and who said, "Let me fall. The one I become will catch me." Isn't that amazing? Let me fall. The one I will become will catch me. Just look back in your life and think at the times that you've fallen. And then realize how much you've grown from that. Because you became more expansive, more aware, more conscious, more happy. That's the one that will catch you when you fall. And when you fall again, the growing you will catch you, the one you are becoming. So I want to do a practice for a moment about remembering and forgetting. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and have come to mind an experience, a moment, and an interaction where you felt most authentic, where you felt the most real, maybe the most safe and loved and accepted. Maybe it was a moment when you were able to tell the truth about something you were experiencing and you felt heard and seen. Maybe it was a moment of service where you gave freely from your heart without expecting anything back. So just let a moment and experience come to mind. Remember to breathe. And take a moment to reflect on the blessings, the gifts, the lift you received from that experience, from that moment. How you grew in faith. How you were able to really take in the love, the acceptance. And now think of a time where you felt you needed to pretend, where you couldn't really be you or speak your truth because you were afraid of the consequence. Think of a time when you did something or said something and you had an expectation. Or you did something just to get attention or kudos. Think of a moment when you felt more inauthentic. Remember to breathe. And notice how this affected you. What happened inside? And so imagine that you are letting that part of you fall, allowing your most authentic self to catch you and lift you up into your new becoming. Allow them to be one. Allow the most authentic self to embrace that part of you that experienced a moment of inauthenticity. And now slowly bring your attention back, and when you're ready, open your eyes. You just built a bridge or two. You just built a bridge or two. When we don't feel good, we have this maybe unconscious tendency to run away from it. That's why we have drug addiction, sex addiction, shopping addiction, digital media addiction. All those things are really escapes. So when we don't feel so good, those are such rich moments to dive into a spiritual practice that you already know, that's already available. And if you don't, reach out to one of our practitioners. They're here to support you. Or come on Sunday when Kat is doing her sound bath. Those of you that don't know about it, there's a flyer here and we send out the weekly emails, so register. I did that myself. But just notice that place of interruption. I love what Reverend Michelle said in her workshop when she says, just notice what interrupts your connection with Spirit. Notice what interrupts your being authentic. Notice what interrupts your joy. Notice what interrupts your authenticity. Just notice it. Because in that moment of notice, we can make a new choice. I love reading the Science of Mind magazine, and this month it's the daily readings with Michael Gott. And he shares the story of his prayer partner and friend who asked a question at one of the workshops. And the question she asked is this: what are you not praying for? What are you not praying for? In our language, that's spiritual mind treatment, or we say treating. What are you not treating for? What are you not infusing with your spiritual practice? What are you not applying this beautiful wisdom to? Not from a place of judgment and shame, but from a place of expanding your joy, expanding your gratitude, expanding a sense of thriving. And so it's kind of an interesting time, because tomorrow at 5:24 p.m. spring starts. I know I wanted more winter, but that's just me. But winter is over. And when you notice the daffodils are starting to bloom, and the forsythia is starting to bud, and the magnolias are starting to bud, and the days are longer, just notice that something in you is coming to life. Something in you is wanting to be lived. Something new, something fresh, something beautiful, something that's freeing. Know that it can happen through you by means of your day-to-day living and your day-to-day practices. And the more we infuse them with remembrance, the more we forget the stuff that interrupts us, that gets in the way. So let's have a song now, and then Gail is going to bless us with her experience with a little power talk. And the song is very applicable to the practice that we did. So allow it to be a continuation of the practice. When you listen to the song, listen for that internal wisdom that is already within you. Okay? Whoops. All right.
Whatever it is, let me cry. If tears gotta fall, let me stop. If I need to rest, let it be. Whatever it is, let it be. Whatever it is, let me cry. If tears gotta fall, let me stop. If I need to rest, let it be. Whatever it is, I keep thinking every day that I need to do more right. Back bottle, clear the clutter, mop and wax all the floors. Can I set aside all my shoulds, coulds and woulds? Can I be okay when it's not all good? Just let it be. Whatever it is, let me cry. If tears gotta fall, let me stop. If I need to rest, let it be. Whatever it is, holding on to what was with all my might. Honey, it's over, it's done, it's out of sight. All the struggle, the pain, gotta let it all go. When I trust my heart, then I know. Just let it be. Whatever it is, let me cry. If tears gotta fall, let me stop. If I need to rest, let it be. Whatever it is.
Pixies. So, following that incredible talk by Reverend Frankie, I just want to say that courage really and bravery is really something that I think it takes to be here in the world. And every day we're faced with a lot of different things that we have to deal with. And one of the things that I've noticed lately is because I've been so consistent with my spiritual practice and my meditation and all of that, that I am in more sync with the universe. And I show you these two books because this morning it has been happening almost on a daily basis that my readings not only coincide with each other, which is pretty amazing, they're two different books, but also this morning coincided with Reverend Frankie's talk. And so Dr. Ernest Holmes talked about, in his Science of Mind 365, he talked about how personality is something that we all have. So we have our spirituality, which then filters into our personality, and then we get to be the individualized expressions that we are. And Mark Nemo, in his book, The Book of Awakening, talked about weakness. See, even hard for me to say weakness, right? Because I'm a human being, and it's hard to talk about weakness. But weakness also being something that we're vulnerable to. And so this morning I'd like to share with you what I found in my own personal experience and also using Science of Mind as far as dealing with authenticity, which has not always been easy for me. I was a really good kid growing up, and like everyone else, I was socialized, and I had different patterns of behaviors and ways of interacting with other people. And so what I love about Dr. Ernest Holmes is that he brought in other disciplines at times to kind of exemplify what happens in Science of Mind. And so he talked about quantum physics and how quantum physics really is kind of proof of what we believe in our teaching. And at times he would bring in certain psychological ideas. And the one that he brought in is the whole idea of patterns. We have patterns in our thinking. We have patterns in our behavior, and some of them are automatic, we don't realize it. And some of them help us to be authentic, and some of us then actually interfere with being authentic. And so if you notice, because many of the people here are already in our teaching and some people are new to it, if you notice, if you're praying or doing what we consider affirmative prayer, which is spiritual mind treatment, you have a desire you want it to manifest. But what happens sometimes is it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't come to us when we want it. We don't know why sometimes. And that's when, as Reverend Frankie was saying, a little self-reflection is helpful. And because the difficulty in manifesting sometimes has to do with a pattern of thinking or feeling about ourselves that gets in the way. And so I will mention that I have a pattern that I've been working on more recently and more diligently, and that is caretaking. I am a caretaker, and I am generous and giving, and sometimes I don't pay attention to what's better for me and what I need, and I can overgive. And I don't think that's unusual because there are, I would say, possibly at least one other person in the room that might identify with that. Maybe one person could identify with my pattern of caretaking. And so what will happen is, if I'm in the pattern and I'm not noticing the pattern, all of a sudden at some point I'll feel really tired and get really exhausted. And that's evidence to me, right? That's data about me that's showing me that something's not in balance, and probably that I'm not being authentic in some way in my life. And then if we reflect upon why that might be, it's from some limiting belief or some early childhood, feeling about myself, about not being maybe good enough or lovable enough, or fill in the blank, right? Something not enough. Now, when we think about authenticity, and we think about God, God is always being authentic. God is always being itself. And God is always giving each one of us everything we need all the time to be who we are as spiritual human beings. And we filter that through our own personalities. So if God is authenticity, and we know in our teaching that every quality that God has resides within us, and that we can activate it and cultivate it, we always have access to authenticity. It's just part of who we are, because we're part of God. So the caretaking that I talked about can sometimes be called codependency. Okay? And codependency, I don't think, is an unusual pattern in our life, because we're always called upon to be who we are in the world, but also deal with the world and their responses to us. So one of the issues that can come up with authenticity, and Reverend Frankie was talking about building bridges. Well, in relationships, we're always building bridges. We're always relating, there's always a back and forth, or unless we withdraw and we're not involved. But even that is a form of non-relating in a relationship way. So what happens is that the building bridges, when we are talking about interpersonal relationships, has to do with boundaries. And what are our boundaries? What are our boundaries in relationships? Do we know what our limits are? Sometimes we do, maybe, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we know what's acceptable to us and what's not acceptable to us. And that's just part of being human. So in terms of boundaries, it's important to pay attention if you feel inauthentic in some way, because it could be a boundary issue. And sometimes, like I said, we know what our boundaries are, but other times people teach us what our boundaries are by crossing them, right? And if we feel if you just pay attention and remember a time when maybe you felt your boundaries were crossed, there's a discomfort that happens in the body. And it's important to pay attention to that. So, like Reverend Frankie says, everything is to be loved, so even the people that challenge us are to be loved. Even the situations that challenge us are to be loved, because they teach us about ourselves. They teach us about our limits, our boundaries, what our tolerances are, what our capabilities are. And that's always a way of learning to hone the individualized expression of God that you are. And so to be able to be aware when you're uncomfortable in an interaction with someone, or even in what you imagine should be an interaction with someone, to pay attention and just tune in, reflect upon it. And if you'll notice, if a boundary's been crossed, you will have a reaction, an emotional reaction. And sometimes we're aware of the reaction, sometimes we're not aware of the reaction, and sometimes we get caught up in the reaction, right? So our challenge then as divine human beings is to become aware of when we're having a reaction and then move through it. And that's not always easy, right? That's not always easy, because if we have a limiting belief or a pattern of behavior that we bump up against in that way, then letting go of the reaction is difficult. But when we can do that, then we can reflect upon, okay, so what is it that bothered me? What is it that I'm not happy with? And so those moments of self-inquiry and self-reflection give us the information we know that we need to then reveal our authenticity in a greater way. So, and then your treatments will work. Your spiritual mind treatments will work better, because you will have that information about not only what you want, but what you want to let go of, so that you can be more authentic. And so one of the ways that I remind myself when it's hard to be authentic is to come back to the idea and the knowing, and the ultimate reality is that God is always within me. God is always the unconditional love within me. So if I'm not feeling the unconditional love for myself in a way that I can express myself authentically, I just come back to the God in me. And there's a simple thing that we can do, which I do every morning, is it's a practice that brings you into your heart. There's a space and a place, I think it's in Oriental medicine, it's called heaven rushing in. And so I'd like you to practice that with me. Put your hands on your heart, okay? And just take a breath. And remember the God that is within you, the unconditional lovingness that is within you. And take a breath. And now I invite you to open your eyes. And think about how at times it is difficult for you to feel that love. So this is the practice of using heaven rushing in. Put your hands on your thighs. You can be seated. Take a deep breath in. Swing your arms up like this. And just imagine all the blessings of the universe, all of God's love and unconditional love raining forward into your fingertips, into your body. And now take another deep breath, scoop it up like this, and just bring it right back there. And now take another breath. So you have just used your body-mind to remember and reconnect, build that bridge to the heaven rushing in within you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much. And so this is our time. I hope you feel that you've been given to in some way with heaven rushing in. This is our time to acknowledge the divine law of circulation. That there is just this one flowing essence, presence, energy of God that is continuously giving to us, and we have to share what's given to us. And so it's our time of sacred giving when we acknowledge what we've been given from this beautiful, beloved Center for Spiritual Living Morristown, where we can give back in the way of financial support. If you have technological support, I think we can use that still. Any other way you would like to serve here, you are welcome to. If you're not sure what kind of service could be helpful, just ask one of us. Alrighty, you can give online, you can give here. There's text to give, which Reverend Frankie loves to do, and many people do that. And then there's conscious, regular giving that people do. So I just want to acknowledge this presence of God, the abundance of the universe, the way in which God always shows up for each and every one of us, supplying all of our needs, and that in our openness, in our welcoming of that, the only thing left to do is to say thank you. So, thank you, and receiving and giving, the one activity of all that is. And so in that mindset of giving and receiving, thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving who you are, showing up as who you are. Thank you for being present and hearing us, seeing us, taking us in, because it's all one activity of love. And so I just want to acknowledge the love that has been present here all day, all morning. The love that is the activity of God's divine givingness. And the way in which each person here is available and open to, has been available and open to the message, the music, the beautiful inspiration, and the ways in which God continues to give to each one of us. Silently, without making fanfare, God is always giving to us. And we remember that. We remember that, and we continue to cultivate our awareness of that in such a way that we feel full all the time. We feel that we can be authentic more and more. We can notice what gets in the way of our authenticity and the building of bridges, and come back to the truth that God is always providing everything we need to help us move forward on our lives, expand, grow, and become our greater yet to be. And for all of this, I say, thank you, Mother, Father, God. I release this word with absolute joy and celebration into the law of life itself, knowing that since it has been spoken, it truly, truly is already now done. And so it is.
So it is.